Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about how to get to a place where you can actually feel safe when life is relatively safe. Okay? Because for a lot of us who have experienced a lot of adversity in our lives, for a lot of us who have grown up in situations where we were perpetually in a situation where we did not feel safe or where we were objectively not safe. We grow up into our adulthoods and we may notice a pattern in ourselves where when life is chaotic and trauma is happening, adversity is happening, we have to be in that fight mode, we have to be in mobilizer mode, we have to be in taking action mode. We actually feel better, more regulated, more on top of ourselves when there's all this stuff going on. Or even just when our schedules are really busy, we are pushing ourselves towards our goals, we're doing all the things, we're achieving all the things, and then we get to that place where either life slows down, we solve the problem, we get out of the trauma, and safety actually happens, or we burn ourselves out. And this is going to be more about what we talk about today, but just kind of saying both sides of this coin here. We burn ourselves out. We get to a place where we can't sustain and maintain that high level of action and pursuing all the things and doing all the things. And we actually feel worse when things are calm, when things aren't happening, when life has come to a place of regularity. And we watch ourselves either freak out about the peace and wonder what's wrong with me, that now that it's calm, now that things actually are okay, now that I have my head above water because life has calmed down, I don't feel better. I actually feel worse. What's wrong with me? Or we think, what's wrong with me that I burnt out? I should have been able to maintain that. I hate that I burnt out. Now that I'm in this burnout state, everything feels awful. Everything feels horrible. Life feels totally out of control. And then as soon as you get even just a little bit of energy back, you're back running again. And then you just repeat that cycle over and over and over again of overdoing it, over pushing yourself, overachieving, burning out, overdoing it, over pushing it, overachieving it, burning out. And then you wonder, what's wrong with me? That I can't just find a sustainable way of life. Either I'm failing because I can't keep up with that high level of action and doing things all the time, or why can't I moderate my movement enough that I don't burn myself out constantly? That is what I'm going to talk about today. These are all signs that essentially our nervous system does not trust safety. It does not believe that safety exists, and it believes that we need to be in a state of constant action and doing and mobilizing and being aware and being alert to be safe. And that any amount of actually letting go and relaxing and trusting that things are going to be okay feels like a major threat to the nervous system. Okay? So it can be a lot easier to recognize this in ourselves when our pattern is that life is chaotic, and we notice that when life gets calm, we don't feel good about it and we sabotage it. Does this make sense? That we watch ourselves create relationship drama. We watch ourselves create body drama. We watch ourselves go and do something and make a decision that's going to throw our finances into chaos, or do something that makes it so that that peace that we had created gets ruined. And we look at ourselves and we think, why did I just do that? I was calm. Things were fine. Everything was okay. And then I went and I created drama and I ruined it for myself. What's wrong with me that I did that? You see? A lot of us have that pattern where it's not even necessarily that life is going off the rails on its own, but we're noticing that when we get to a place of safety and calm, we then make a decision, or seemingly we make a decision, to throw things out of balance again. And then we look at ourselves and think, why did I do that? Right? Or the other side of the coin is, as soon as things get calm, as soon as things get not so much movement, there's a big discomfort. And we feel like, okay, it's time to get back into action mode. It's time to get into achievement mode. And you sign up for a bunch of things. You decide you're going to up level your business and you're going to pursue all of these hobbies and you're going to actualize your mental state and you're going to be the most, on point with your diet and workout plan, and you have your thing that you do that then fills your life with all this activity and all of this stuff. And in the beginning, it feels really good. In the beginning, it feels like I'm on it, I'm achieving it, I'm doing it, I'm working towards it, I'm going to achieve it this time, right? Because you've probably done this many, many times before. I'm going to sustain this time. This is totally sustainable for me. Everything is great. And then the weeks go by, the months go by, and we start to slip and slip and slip until eventually, like I say, we crash. And we think, holy shit, what just happened? Right? Like, I took on all this stuff. I wanted to do all these things. I thought I could handle it. But then I crashed, and that feels awful. So now I need to get myself back on track of doing all these things again and having this very full, chaotic life, which doesn't feel like chaos in the beginning, but it always leads to burnout. Okay? So like I said, both of these things are a sign that our nervous systems don't know how to trust calm and safety. Other ways that we can notice this is difficulty sleeping, right? Like literally laying in bed at night with that tired but wired feeling all the time. And no matter how much we try to calm ourselves, no matter how much we try to regulate, we do our breathing and all this stuff, we can't get ourselves to sleep. Noticing that we aren't able to calm our minds or calm our bodies unless we're moving, right? Unless we're literally like exercising or running or busy all day. That's when our bodies feel the calmest. But when we're just sitting, if we're just noticing, if not a lot is going on, we're not having a conversation, we're not achieving something, we're not in production mode, we can't be okay. We don't feel safe. That feels awful. Yes? Are we noticing these patterns? Can we identify with any of this? Okay. So if you're noticing or identifying with anything that I'm talking about here, again, these are all signs that we are likely in a state of fight or flight, and we don't even recognize that that's what we're in, because that just feels normal to us. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want to talk about today, is that many of us who grew up in situations where we did not feel safe with our caregivers, where we did not feel safe in our homes. Yes, when I'm not overachieving, I feel horrible, and then I try to overcompensate. Yeah. And then you burn yourself out, and then you try to overcompensate by overachieving, and then you burn yourself out, and then you overachieve, and then you burn yourself out, and every time you're overachieving, you don't think it's overachieving. It just seems like that's what I have to do. Is that how it feels? and anything less than that is failing, that's usually a sign that we grew up in a situation where it was not safe for us to be ourselves, where we did not feel safe in our households, where we did not feel like who and what we were was good enough, or we experienced actual objective lack, right? So sometimes, even if our caregivers were doing their best to try to provide for us and wanted to be there for us and loved us the best that they could, but we were feeling from them a constant state of insecurity and lack and not being okay, because that's what they were experiencing. And therefore our needs were going unmet because their attention was divided, and they couldn't actually in a quality way connect with us because they were in a state of fear where they weren't able to provide for our needs, and we had to go without, right? Even though they didn't mean it, even though they didn't want to, we learned there isn't enough for me. I'm not going to get my needs met. There is scarcity. And that was just part of our experience, and they couldn't protect us from that. If we grew up in either of these situations, the objectively unsafe, and then of course, if we were objectively unsafe with our caregivers, if they were abusive in any way, if they harmed us physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually in any way, if we grew up in a state where we could not be safe in our own households for any reason, because we were going to get judged, shamed, blamed, rejected, that's real trauma, that's real adversity that actually affects us. Okay, so a lot of us look back on our childhood and we think, I wasn't outright abused. I wasn't sexually abused. I wasn't physically abused. My caregivers didn't verbally abuse me. I wasn't starved. I had a roof over my head and I got to go to school and everything looked normal. So I was safe. But that is not the same thing as knowing in your body and your nervous system that you're safe. Okay? So what that is that is your adult mind projecting onto your childhood experience what you should have felt versus what you actually experienced. Okay? So if we grew up in households where we were objectively abused, objectively unsafe, we can look back and say, okay, there was physical abuse, there was violence between my caregivers, there was violence between my caregivers and others on a regular basis. My siblings were abused in some way and I watched that abuse. That's objectively, we can usually say, okay, yeah, objectively I wasn't safe and my nervous system is now scared. If we experienced lack, even if our caregivers didn't mean it, and they loved us, and they tried their best, and they were doing their best, but they weren't able to provide for our needs, and their emotions and their not being okay spilled over onto us. So we had to go into caretaker mode. We had to be little counselors for our parents. The way that we got love and approval was through being there for them and supporting them and not having needs and being the good kid and being calm and being okay and being poised so that we didn't stress them out more. Those are two ways. And then the third way is if you were not accepted for who you were. If you were made to feel like your personality was wrong, your expression was wrong, your needs were wrong, the way you are was wrong, that the things you wanted to do and become were frowned upon, that there was an expectation of you to be a certain way, and you were constantly trying to become that, and always failing and never getting approval and never getting love and never feeling like your caregivers were showing up for who you are and making that safe and teaching you how to be that in the world. Those are the three main ways that we end up with this pattern now of not feeling safe ever. So again, a lot of the time our adult mind, like I was saying, projects onto our childhood experience and says, I wasn't objectively abused. I did objectively have enough. Yeah, my caregivers didn't approve of me and they didn't like me or whatever. But that's not enough to have put my system into fight or flight, because that wasn't a real problem. That wasn't a real threat. And what I'm here to say is, from your childhood experience, that is untrue. From your childhood experience, not being loved, not being seen, not being approved of by your caregivers is a major existential crisis. It is a major existential crisis that absolutely puts your body into a state of fight or flight. Because we depend on our caregivers for everything, and their rejection, their lack of love, their lack of attuning to us and making us safe for who we are makes us feel like if I am myself, I am not going to be okay. And then we live lives of constantly being in a war and a battle against ourselves, which is like the deepest stress we can have. Because you are always yourself. You are always in a situation where your true self is wanting to come out. And the more of that was rejected, the more of that was made unsafe, the more your body is going to be in a state of fear, because you're always going to want to be yourself. You see? So if you have to be in like essentially a constant state of self-monitoring and self-rejection, because so much of you was rejected by your caregivers, you're going to be in a state of fight or flight all the time. No matter what's happening around you, there's going to be this hypervigilance of I can't do that, I can't be that, self-monitoring, self-policing, that makes us feel like we're never safe. And then from there, we usually scapegoat that onto something. Our bodies, our academics, our financial achievements, our artistic expression. Something we find that we go, okay, if I can just achieve perfection in this area, if I can just fix my personality to be this way, if I can just achieve this in my personal expression, if I can get to this financial security space, achieve this in my work, have this many kids, whatever it is, we're going to create some sort of scapegoat that we're going to then say, every time I fail to perfect this part of myself, that is why I feel like shit. That's the reason. And then when we go into that overachieving mode, we're going to be convinced that when I fix this thing, right? Because the overachieving will then be zeroed in on the scapegoat. Let me know if this is resonating. There's going to be that thing you always think you need to do. That one thing that you're convinced, if I could just perfect this part of myself, everything is going to be okay. And we get on track with working to perfect that thing over and over and over again. But we work to it, we try to become it, we try to achieve it, we get part of the way there, we get burnt out, we fall off track, we sabotage ourselves, and then we think, this is the reason why I feel bad, because I didn't achieve the thing. Because we're not noticing that we were feeling insecure and not good and not safe, even while we were doing the being on track. It's just that while we were on track, there was this promise that I'm on my way to getting to this accomplishment, which really is about, I think that when I get to that accomplishment, I'm finally going to be safe. But we have this unconscious, subconscious understanding that that's not actually true. So this means that the thing we're working towards to perfect is either something arbitrary, right? It's not a specific goal. It's, I want to perfect my artistic expression, which is like, how could you even know that you got there? You could never achieve that because it's not an achievable thing. You see, I want to perfect my personality. Well, how would you know? All you know is that it's never right. You want to perfect your body, but it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you achieve. It doesn't matter how much you get to any shape or size or whatever. It's never enough. And we sabotage ourselves over and over and over again, making sure we never actually get to the goal, so that we constantly have a scapegoat of, I don't feel good because I'm failing, not having to look at, I don't feel good because ultimately I don't feel safe. Ultimately, I don't feel like I'm good enough or worthy or like I'm going to be supported in my actual expression. That's what's really going on. So we're in a constant state of fight or flight, but we're not noticing it as that. We're noticing it as overachieving and burning out, or as having to be in constant motion, or we're noticing it as soon as things get calm, I sabotage it, and I don't know why I do that. Is this resonating? Are we getting there? Does this make sense? So this again, I want you to recognize, all boils down to not feeling safe, that you being yourself is going to mean being okay. It's somewhere along the line, your body learned that this world is not a safe place for you. Physically, mentally, emotionally, you are not going to be provided for. And you learned to compensate for that with constant movement, constant overachieving, creating chaos when there's calm, so that you don't have to face those feelings that are going to come up when things are calm. Constant self-monitoring. And generally, another thing that's going to come up in there is people-pleasing. and trying so hard to figure out what those around you want you to be, in the hopes that eventually you will be loved and safe. So what all this boils down to is, it was not safe for me to be myself. I had to be people pleasing. I had to be achieving. I had to be changing myself. I had to be constantly on alert. Because if I relaxed, I got attacked, or there wasn't enough for me. And now your body is locked into that. Even if your mind can believe or see or feel or understand that life isn't like that anymore, the body is locked into that. Okay? Does this make sense? We're with me so far? Any questions? Okay. So what do we do about this? How do we get to a place where we can actually relax? First thing, if we're in the category of overachieving and burning out, it's our job to start to say, this thing I'm constantly trying to achieve or perfect in myself, it is not about this. This, for me, was the thing that actually started this whole company that I run right now. This revelation. Because I was the kind of person who literally had to be moving and achieving and accomplishing something 24/7. To the point where I used to work myself so hard that I would get what we called the black lung every year. And it's insane. Like, I was chronically ill, I was completely depleted and exhausted, and I would not let one thing in my life slide. I would not let anyone help me. And anytime there was peace, I would destroy it. Okay, so yes, I think I'm also in environments that expect me to overachieve or I get rejected. How do I handle that? Yes. So there are two things here. That first thing is recognizing that pattern, right? So I recognize that in myself, that I was constantly running, like literally would stand and jog in place for hours a day so I didn't have to sit down because I couldn't. My body was in such a state of fear. And being around my caregivers was like the most triggering thing possible. Because it was just a constant rejection of everything about me. Constantly being unsafe, constantly having my needs invalidated, being made the bad guy, being the scapegoat of the family, all of that stuff. It was so triggering and traumatizing, constantly. So there were two things that had to happen for healing to start. And the first is one thing that I'm going to mention that I understand is not always possible or easy for everybody. But I'm going to mention it because I think it needs to be mentioned, which is, for a lot of us, the first step we need to take somewhere along the line, no, maybe not the first step, but a step we're going to need to take is to get out of that environment. To, for a while, cut contact with the people who make us feel this level of unsafe. To go no contact with our caregivers for a while. To move out. To get ourselves into a different situation. Because a lot of the time, being stuck in these environments makes it really hard for us to do the mental and emotional inner work we need to do to be able to shift this stuff. Right? If the external is constantly reinforcing the shitty things we believe about ourselves, and the fear, and the trauma, and the adversity, and the you're not okay, and it's not okay to be who you are, it's very challenging to shift these patterns. Okay? So that's first thing, is your body might just be responding to the actual environment you're in that actually isn't safe for you. And there's very little amount of nervous system regulation and therapy and all this stuff that we can do that can make that feel better. Right? Like, if you're in a moldy house, and this is how I like to describe this, especially to my clients, right? This is akin to growing up in a moldy house. Meaning you have two shitty options. Number one, you stay in the house because you need a house. You need a safe place to be. You need shelter. But there's mold in the house, so you're getting sick the longer you're in it. Or you leave the house, get away from the mold, but now you don't have a house. Both options are shitty. And so this was kind of a big part of my journey too. That I had to leave my caregiver's home. I had to leave my country of origin. Literally, for me, that's what it took. Cut contact completely. Be in a state of relative isolation for a while, which isn't necessarily healthy long term. But it was a step I needed to take in the interim to be able to start to sort through what was going on and to rewire my brain and to gain different perspectives. So it was a shitty thing to have to do, because in real reality, if we are in an ideal situation, what we should have is a home that has no mold. In other words, we should have caregivers that are safe for us, that are there to be a sturdy foundation, that help lift us up, that help build up our self-esteem, that help empower us to learn about who we are and how the world works, so that we can eventually go out into the world feeling empowered, but feeling like we have that family of support to lean on if we run into trouble. Right? It's not that we're necessarily supposed to stay in our family house forever, but it is to say that we are supposed to have a family that is relatively supportive for us, no matter what we go out and choose to do. We are supposed to have a family that builds us up enough that we feel ready to go out into the world, and we don't feel like we're just fighting for ourselves and on our own, because we have these foundations to go back to. So if you put your life in context and compare it to that, that's what's healthy. You wouldn't have to do so much work on your nervous system if you had that. Think of it that way. So the farther away your experience was from what I just described, the more your nervous system is likely not okay. Yeah? So first things first is putting it into context. I don't feel safe for a very good reason. This was what I was taught life was. This is how I was treated. These were all the things that were rejected in me. These were all the ways I had to cope and compensate and grow up way before I was ready. right? If you were the caregiver for your caregivers, that's not okay. That was a trauma. If you were the perpetually, wow, you're so mature for your age, that's likely because you weren't being supported the way you needed to be supported. If you, right, were that little helper, you were the good kid. If you were the scapegoat, if you were the one the family always blamed, if you were the household barometer, and instead of the family changing the things that were harming you, you were blamed as the problem. If you were objectively abused, your nervous system learned, I am not safe. It is not okay. So recognizing that and starting to get away from the people who reinforce that. And then your inner work is to start to recognize your patterns of overachieving. To start to recognize your scapegoat. That thing you perpetually say, if and when I achieve this, when I become this, when I reach this place, when I do this thing, I will finally feel good enough. And the reason I don't feel good is because I'm not doing this enough. I haven't achieved this yet. But noticing that goalpost just keeps getting moved. And no matter what you accomplish, no matter where you land, no matter where you get, it never feels good enough. You're always disappointed in yourself. You always feel like there's more you could have done. There's like grief when you get to goals versus celebration and feeling good. That's how you know you're working from fight or flight, not authentic expression. And that's when we need to start to make that line in the sand that we start to say, okay, I am trying to achieve. I am trying to become. I am trying to get to this place. Why? We have to start to pattern interrupt ourselves. We have to start to say, what do I think I am going to get when I achieve the thing? What am I not getting right now that I need? Where is there pain and grief and anger and sadness in me that I am turning in on myself and saying the reason I feel like shit is because I'm not good enough? Remember, shame, blame, and guilt are always lies. So we need to start to ask ourselves, what if it's not because I'm shitty? What if I don't feel this way because I fell off track, or I didn't achieve my goal, or I'm not there yet? But I feel this way for some other reason, because I was taught to feel this way. Those are the questions we need to start to ask ourselves. Okay, so agreed. I went no contact with my mom. She was diagnosed narcissist by my therapist when I was anorexic. Easiest decision ever. Now I don't want to push everyone away. How do you know who can be a part of your life? So this, again, is going to be something that we figure out as we start to make ourselves safe. Because sometimes we're going to realize that the people that are triggering us aren't actually judging us the way that we think that they are. Don't actually have the expectations we think that they do. We have scapegoated or projected onto them our caregivers. A lot of us do this with our significant others and our close friends. Is that we shift being codependent with our caregivers to being codependent with our partners and our friends. And then it can feel like our partners and our friends aren't safe places because we constantly feel like we have to be living up to their expectations, doing what they want us to be doing, making them happy, satisfying them, and we constantly feel like we're failing because we think we're failing them. When really, we've just shifted. I need to be perfect for my caregivers, and then they will love me and make me safe, to if I'm just perfect for my partners and my friends, they will love me and make me safe. Right? So it's about starting to do that inner work of learning to approve of ourselves. That's first thing. Learning to approve of ourselves. Learning to be able to see that even if other people don't approve of us, even if other people don't love us, even if other people don't understand us and can't validate us, we need to learn to love, approve of, and validate ourselves. So we become less and less dependent on that love and validation coming from the outside. And then we can start to tease apart who the healthy people around us are and who are the people who literally only love us when we perform for them. How much of it was our projection? How much of it is actually true? Second thing is, a lot of us have to go through a really shitty time of validating and experiencing and understanding that life is never going to be perfectly safe, right? Like that's the big revelation. That's usually the hardest thing for us to get to, is realizing that thing we've been chasing our whole lives, perfect safety, so that we can finally feel like we're going to get our needs met and we can express ourselves and we're going to be okay, is never going to exist. That perfect community is never going to exist. That sometimes we are going to have to accept imperfect help, people who can't fully understand, can't really get the whole thing, but can help us a little bit to better our situation. Or we are going to have to accept that we might have to do some things on our own. That sometimes we are going to have to be the ones to save ourselves instead of constantly looking for others to love us and approve of us and then save us. And that sucks. We shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't be that way. In real reality, we should have support, right? Like I said, we should live in that house that is healthy. We shouldn't need to save ourselves. But sometimes we need to start to realize that we are just going to have to learn to accept and embrace who we are. Accept and embrace what we need. And start to build that life, knowing we're going to lose people, knowing people aren't going to approve of us, and knowing we might have to do it on our own for a while. That perfect love and perfect safety are never going to exist. Perfect provision is never going to exist. And that we're going to have to be there for ourselves, even when no one else is. And then finding our little steps to building life that's better. Because that's the other thing, is most of us are then coming from places and situations where our lives do not feel good. Right? We have been trying so hard to be what others want us to be, and to suppress ourselves, and to get rid of ourselves, and to achieve these things that are a total side quest that have nothing to do with who we really are. And so we're living these lives and these realities that feel terrible for us. And now not only do we have to accept that we're not going to be approved of and made safe by the people around us, we also have to accept that we have to now accept ourselves and then take little steps by ourselves where we're going to be rejected to build a life that works for us. And it's not going to feel great right away. And in fact, it's going to feel worse sometimes. It's hard. That's why this path of self-love is not for the the faint of heart. It's not for people who just want something easy, because it isn't. Especially when we're coming from a background of growing up in environments that were very, very antagonistic to us. Learning to be on our own side, learning to take steps, learning to do things for ourselves, not for the approval of others. It's hard work. But this is how we start to build safety with ourselves. Being able to actually validate our emotions instead of writing them off and blaming ourselves. Being able to grieve and be upset with our caregivers for how much they failed us instead of blaming ourselves. Being able to take little steps, just little steps, that show us that we are capable of creating a better life, one step at a time. That's taking us away from this life that keeps us in a perpetual state of fight or flight. Right? It's not going to be just trying to convince your nervous system that you're safe. It's about realizing that your nervous system is trying to tell you the life we have doesn't feel good for me. I'm on alert because I don't trust it. And then if we find ourselves in a situation of actual relative safety, that's when we start to do the nervous system work of orientation on a regular basis. Teaching our nervous system that life is different now than it was before. Okay, so first half of it is a lot of us are going to have to do work to actually change our lives. We're not going to find peace or safety or comfort in the conditions that made us scared for ourselves to begin with. We have to cut people out. We have to go forward. We have to look for a different community, new community, get a therapist. We have to work with people who can support us even if it's not perfect. We have to take little steps to move ourselves away from that environment by validating ourselves, right? Those are the foundations of the self-love work. It's not that just approving of yourself changes your circumstances and makes everything awesome. It's that when you finally learn to approve of yourself and validate yourself and validate your needs, you can get to a place of realizing what you need to change about your life to make it better for you, instead of constantly trying to fit yourself into this life that doesn't work for you, instead of constantly trying to get people to love you and approve of you who are never going to love you and approve of you. We learn self-love not because self-love takes the pain away, but it makes it so that you stop projecting that pain onto yourself. You stop blaming yourself for that pain. You stop being in those loops of self-improvement and failing and self-improvement and failing, so you can stop looking to those around you to approve of you and then help you, so that you can finally say, no, I need to start making these choices for myself. It's the things you do to get yourself out of that situation that are going to make it better. Approving of yourself is what gives you the capacity to make those choices, to do something different. Do you see? Approving of yourself doesn't magically take the pain away. Approving of yourself says, oh, it's not my fault It's not about continually striving to get these people to love me. It's about realizing they aren't going to. Accepting that. And then working to change your life in the ways that you need to, right? I left my family. I left my religion. I did all of these things that I needed to do for me that were completely disapproved of by my caregivers and everyone around me, with little to no support, and everyone telling me I was crazy the whole time. The things that made me feel better were the action steps. But self-love is what gave me the ability to take the action steps, instead of just constantly trying to become what my caregivers wanted me to become, hoping that they would love me one day and then make me feel better. That's what this is about. That's why we have to cut ourselves off from that scapegoat of, if I just perfect myself in this way, everything will be better. Because what we really think is going to happen is then we're going to be approved of, and then the people around us are going to make us safe so that we can finally start to live a life that works for us. But that's never going to happen. We need to approve of ourselves so we can start taking steps towards a life that's going to work for us, regardless of if anyone approves of us or not. That's phase 1. And that is a huge, huge thing. So don't try to do that this week. Remember, these videos are me giving you the view of the map. This is the overarching big picture. This takes years of work. So don't expect yourself to just do this. That's why the mystery school is 5 years long. That's why I coach with people. That's why I have a gabillion videos. That's why there are several tools on the self-love path, because this is complicated, but this is what it looks like overall. Okay? And then when we start to create actual safety, when we start to create that life that's working for us, that's when we start to use those nervous system tools of regulation and orientation and training our minds and bodies to look for the good, to look for what is working, to look for what is safe, to actually register these things somatically, to feel them intentionally, so that we can start to shift our bodies out of that constant state of fear when things are actually okay, right? So sometimes that state of fear cannot be shifted until we shift our lives, right? It doesn't matter how much you regulate yourself inside of a burning house, inside of a moldy house. You are going to be in a state of emergency because you are in a state of emergency. That's why the self-love path is about learning how to get on your own side. Stop blaming yourself. Stop scapegoating yourself. Stop rejecting yourself. Stop trying to perfect yourself so other people will love you. Realize what you need. Make those life changes you need to make, whether people approve of you or not. You approve of yourself so you can make the changes you can make. And you just take steps. Every time you take a step, you're going to get a little bit more empowered, and you're going to be able to make a bigger step. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be awful, and I promise you, it gets better. But we have to be willing to take little steps, to be rejected, to be misunderstood, to be disapproved of, and to do it anyways, because we have to get out of the moldy house. And then, like I said, when we get out of the moldy house, we have to start to create safety for ourselves by regulating and noticing the safety. And that's when we practice the nervous system tools of I am okay. Because we can trust ourselves at that point. That's when we're going to be able to trust, okay, am I feeling this way because there's objectively something that needs to shift? I'm not gaslighting myself into trying to feel safe where I'm not. Or is just this my body being locked in this state because of years and years and years of adversity? And then I need to learn what tools of nervous system regulation help me come into the objective safety that I actually have. So we look for the safety. We look for what is working. We look for the support, right? That our brains are now totally used to filtering out. Because when we grow up in that constant adversity, we have to recognize that our brains are now going to be wired to look for threat everywhere and to not see the safety. So we have to take control of that and start to look for the safety that does exist. We have to start to say, my mind is canceling out what is good. It's canceling out what does work for me. It's canceling out the positive stuff. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that my mind is just so focused on keeping me safe that it has me only looking for threat even where threat doesn't exist. So then we have to start to actively look for what's working and what's safe and what's good to start to shift our nervous systems. Okay? So that's the whole big picture. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a program you didn't choose. You are trying to keep yourself safe. You are doing the best you can with what you have. So how can you support yourself? By learning to validate and approve of yourself. So you can start to make the changes you need to make your life better and objectively more safe. And then when you start to do that, how can you start, and at the same time, how can you start to look for what is good, what is working, and somatically register that? So that you start to train your mind to not just be in look for the fear, and instead you look for the things that are objectively good, because I promise you they also exist. You can shift out of it has to be perfect or it's nothing to seeing the safety where it does exist, the imperfect love that people do give you, the imperfect support, the imperfect step you can take, and how it imperfectly did improve things a little bit. And validating that stuff, acknowledging that stuff, letting the imperfect be good enough for now, instead of writing it off unless it's perfect. Okay? Okay. So is there any questions, comments, concerns before we end today? Hopefully that was informative, helpful, gave you a map, helps you have some understanding. Remember, this is not curative. This is awareness building. These videos are awareness. Okay? Okay. One step at a time. We do this one step at a time. All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.